I now welcome Mr Alan Joyce and his colleagues from Qantas. And Mr Joyce, I'd like to invite you to make a brief opening statement, but in view of the tight timelines tonight, if we could keep it as brief as possible, that would be appreciated.
Sure. Thank you, Senator. I might introduce my colleagues, Andrew Finch, who's the General Counsel for Qantas Group, Jane Herdlicker, who's the Group Chief Executive for Jetstar, and Gareth Evans, who's the Group Financial Officer. As you know, Qantas has made a formal submission to this inquiry. We're also tabling the remarks I made at last week's Senate's Rural and Regional Affairs and Transport References Committee hearing. So rather than go into the detail, I would like to briefly state our key points relevant to tonight's terms of reference. Right now, in our core domestic market, Qantas faces a manifestly unlevel playing field, which threatens our future prospects. 3 foreign airlines, all totally or majority government-owned, have taken a 70% ownership of Virgin. And late last year, they poured more than $300 million into the airline to bankroll continued major capacity increases into the market by Virgin at a time when Virgin is making significant losses. This is a strategy directed at weakening Qantas and promoting the interests of Virgin's foreign owners. Since the Virgin restructure in early 2012, we've been talking to successive Australian governments about measures to address this clear distortion of the market. Every major political party has agreed that the playing field is not level, including all those represented here tonight on this committee. A decision has now been taken by this government to ask the Parliament to amend the Qantas Sale Act. We support this as a means to level the playing field. As we state in our submission, Qantas is prevented by the Act from competing on equal terms to that of our competitors. This is without precedent elsewhere in the economy and is without parallel in the global aviation industry. To our knowledge, no other business in Australia's economy is competitively handicapped in this manner. Before I take your questions, I would also like to raise a distortion of a different kind. We have seen a line being run by some of the unions that the prospect of repealing Part 3 of the Qantas Sale Act will have negative safety implications. This is blatant fear-mongering. It is playing the safety card as a tool of industrial relations. This committee needs no reminder of the absolute Qantas commitment to safety and our exemplary track record of delivering it. The majority of Qantas's maintenance is done in Australia. Our A380s and our 747s are maintained overseas, but regardless of geography, all of our maintenance is done at facilities approved by CASA and to Qantas's high standards. As always in aviation, there are multiple fail-safes to account for the very small likelihood of human error. Suggestion that any mistake is a potential catastrophe is alarmist and deeply irresponsible. I would ask the committee and the Australian media not to take the scaremongering at face value, but to check the facts. And we also want to submit a response to the claims made by the ALAEA submission last week, which goes through those in more detail. Finally, let me say that it is now up to Parliament to consider the issues in relation to the proposed amendment to the Qantas Sale Act. The responsibility of Qantas management is to get on with the great Australian business. I know how satisfied our customers are with our service and product. Customers tell me and our research confirms it. I want to assure you and all our customers that no matter what changes we make as a business, we'll always maintain our business-wide commitment to excellence in both Qantas and Jetstar. We'll make sure that Qantas remains the best premium domestic airline in the world and a top-tier international carrier, and that Jetstar remains the leading lowest-fare airline in Australia in all the markets it serves. We'll continue to strengthen Qantas loyalty, and we'll continue to serve Australia. With the banking of the Qantas board, Qantas management now is taking the right steps to secure the future of this great company. We do on behalf of thousands of loyal employees, millions of customers, and all in Australia. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Joyce. I might just ask a couple of questions myself before handing over to other members of the committee. You mentioned that this bill, if it is passed, will allow you to compete on a level playing field with other Australian airlines. As I understand it, though, this bill will also make you subject to the Air Navigation Act, which has a number of aspects of it which are equivalent to those that are in the Qantas Sale Act, including limiting foreign ownership of international operators to 49% and so on, and maintaining an operational base in Australia. What are the actual differences? What are the disabilities that the Qantas Sale Act actually imposes on Qantas that renders your current situation not a level playing field?
I think to answer that question, Senator, we just have to look at what our competitor has been able to do. And a competitor 2 years ago was able to set up a structure with a domestic business and an international business that allowed it to participate in getting foreign ownership now of 3 airlines that, with that structure, that have nearly 70% of the airline and total foreign ownership of 80%. So they, in terms of comparison to Qantas, don't have the limitations of the 25% of single airline ownership, 35% of total airline ownership, because they're up at nearly 70%, and don't have a cap of 49% of foreign ownership, because as their domestic operation is now over 80% foreign owned. In addition, they have the flexibility and the ability to do all of their heavy maintenance, which all of the heavy maintenance is done offshore, all of the call centres is done offshore, and have the ability to have a lot of their operations done overseas. So the flexibility that our competitor has in both access to foreign capital, access to foreign airlines capital in particular, and access to you doing their operations offshore in the case of heavy maintenance is very different for what limits Qantas.
And the passage of this bill, you think, would remove those disabilities in terms of your competitive?
Well, there's still obviously Qantas is still will with these changes will still be and will be subject to the Air Navigation Act, as is Virgin. So the same restrictions will apply to both of us, and Qantas will be still subject to FIRB approval, so that particularly if any foreign airlines or state-owned enterprises wanted to invest in Qantas, they would still have to go through the FIRB process. So there's still obviously the appropriate limitations that apply to a competitor on Qantas.
Okay, now, I'm sure that there'll be questions about maintenance from other senators, but in terms of, one of the things that I understand is that newer aircraft require lower maintenance, lower levels of maintenance. Would you just explain that to the committee just briefly before we move on to others? There's lots of things I'd like to ask you about, but time won't allow.
Yeah, I think it's like any technology, Senator. If you think of your own car and how it was maintained 20 years ago, and the amount of servicing that the car would have required, the checking that the car would have required, and the new technology and how new cars are serviced and maintained, it is extremely different. We find that in the new technology aircraft, you know, particularly the 787s is a good example that's come into Jetstar. Its heavy maintenance check interval for the significant checks is 12 years because of the reliability and the technology that's built into that aircraft. That is not the case with technology that was there 20 years ago. And as Qantas has modernised its fleet, its requirement for doing that maintenance has significantly changed. You know, again, 10 years ago, we had over 30 747s. They were the prime vehicle of our international operation. The heavy maintenance on those aircraft is done at Avalon in Victoria. And we utilise the facility consistently with those 30 aircraft. We've replaced those aircraft now with the A380s, newer 747s, and the newer A330s. And as a consequence, we will be down to 9 747s within a couple of years. And the need to do that maintenance in Avalon now no longer exists. In fact, if we'd have kept the Avalon heavy maintenance base open, it would have this year been 50% of the time have no work. 50% of the time it would have been active. And as a consequence, we couldn't have afforded to continue with that. And unfortunately, we had to make the decision to close that heavy maintenance. Similarly, with our Tullamarine heavy maintenance base in Victoria, the technology of the new 737s had changed so much in terms of the need to do checks that it made sense for us to move that work in that new aircraft to Brisbane, do with the A330s there, get critical mass, one heavy maintenance facility.
So that's heavy maintenance and the more routine?
Yeah, so one of the announcements as part of the 5,000 jobs that we announced recently that we're going to lose is around how we do line maintenance. And we're changing the way we're doing line maintenance on a lot of our aircraft. Instead of doing lots of smaller checks, and having engineers going to the aircraft, opening up the aircraft and doing the check. We're doing them together in one larger checks, the way the manufacturer recommends it and the way the rest of the world actually does that work. And as a consequence of that, that meant that there was 300 people that we had, unfortunately, again, to make redundant because work practices and procedures had changed in relation to that. Now, we've spent billions of dollars. We've spent billions of dollars on new aircraft. We need to get the benefits of those maintenance and fuel and the efficiencies out of them to really justify that expenditure. You know, for the last, since I've been CEO, we've bought now well over 100 aircraft out of a fleet of 300 aircraft. Our fleet now is the youngest it's been since privatisation, 7.6 years of age, younger than Singapore Airlines, younger than Cathay, younger than Lufthansa, younger than British Airways. For us to get the benefits of that investment and that technology, we had to make these changes with maintenance, the changes that we're doing in Avalon, Tullamarine and line maintenance. Otherwise, we've spent a lot of money on new aircraft and new technology around getting the bottom line benefits we need.
Thank you, Mr Joyce. Senator STERLE.
Thank you, Chair. And before I do go, if I may clear with you that I have probably about 20-odd questions, bearing in mind I would really appreciate if Mr Joyce could just answer them as directly, or his officers. And I'm not preaching you, Mr Joyce, but you are very good on giving long answers, which probably are important. But for the purposes of this inquiry, so we don't have to call you back for the Rural, Regional Affairs and References Committee to complete our questions, I'd like quick answers if possible. But I'll just firstly just clear up one thing. You said in Sydney the other day the average age of the Qantas fleet is 7.6. Does that include Jetstar as well?
It does. It's a Qantas Group fleet, yeah.
What is Qantas without Jetstar?
It's getting about 9.
9.8. About 9.8? Okay, thank you. Mr Joyce, if Section 7 of the Qantas Sales Act is repealed, it is not the case, or is it not the case, sorry, that any job that can be done offshore will be done offshore and these full-time jobs will be lost to Australia forever?
Sorry, Senator, could you repeat that question?
Yes, I'm saying that if Section 7 of the Qantas Sales Act is repealed, is it not the case that any job that can be done offshore will be done offshore and these full-time jobs will be lost to Australia forever?
That's not the case, Senator.
Okay, thank you. Exactly how many jobs could be sent overseas? Have you done some sums?
No, Senator. I think what we've said is that certainly the plans that we have to turn the business around constitute us making 5,000 people redundant and protecting the 27,000 jobs that we have within the group. We have a $2 billion cost reduction programme.
Mr Joyce, I'm sorry to interrupt because the Chair is going to ride me for time. I understand, I have heard. I just want you to be, please, as succinct.
I am, Senator.
Can be. Have you done any sums, or has any of your crew up there done the sums of how many jobs will be lost offshore?
And as I said, Senator, I'll finish the answer to the question. So the 5,000 jobs that we've outlined, that it's involved, and these are jobs that have disappeared as a consequence of the changes that we talked about on maintenance, the changes that we've been talking about in head office.
Well, while we're on maintenance, have you got any sums of how many maintenance jobs will be gone?
We've already, yes, Senator. We've talked about the closure of Avalon,
yes.
and we've talked about the line maintenance roles.
So how many jobs?
So Avalon has got 300 jobs that closes this week, and then we've got the line maintenance jobs, which disappeared. The line maintenance jobs do.
Yep.
They're not being done offshore. It's 300 jobs that we announced.
But if the Sales Act goes through, the repeal, the part that you want gone, will there be any more additional jobs going offshore in the maintenance area?
We have no more plans on that, Senator.
No more plans than the 300 from Avalon?
But this is, sorry?
No more than the 300 that was announced with the closure of Avalon?
That's right.
Okay.
So what this is, again, what I'm saying to you, Senator, is that, and I think we did say last Friday, this is all about making sure that Qantas has the same flexibility of our competitor.
I fully understand you
because
did
as
say
I pointed
that.
out, and there's some misinformation, I think, about what our competitor does. Our competitor has all of its heavy maintenance done offshore.
Okay, Mr Joyce,
Qantas needs the same flexibility.
I'm trying to work with you, Mr Joyce, because I'm happy to call you back through you, Chair, to the Rural Regional Affairs and Reference Committee if we can't get through it. I'd like to give you the opportunity if we can get it all done and dusted.
Senator, I hope you'd respect the fact that I've probably turned up to these committees more than any other CEO in the country has. I think of more, and we're giving plenty of time to the Senate in terms of answering the questions, but I would ask at the same time that you respect our ability to give full answers to the questions and not have them.
I am working with you and I fully respect that. That's why I'm asking asking you, without all the additional, if you can just come straight to the question, I would greatly
Senator
appreciate it.
STERLE,